Hey, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Father.
Okay, so just in case somebody's watching this video, after I shut the video off, I announced that Mass on Thursday will be at 8 a.m. instead of 9 a.m. Spread the word. Okay, so before we go on to catechism and the catechism and that story I promised you about Saint Don Bosco. Do you have any questions? What can't you get to sleep at night over lately? Yeah, it's hard. I know. I mean, it's like you have tons of questions while, like, say, the homily's going. Hey, can you stop for a second? Yeah, no, you can't do that. Yeah.
Why did you refer to him, Don Bosco, as blessed instead of saint?
Because it actually does that in all the prayers. It wasn't officially calling him blessed, but they call all the saints blessed.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, what is that? Don Bosco. What does the Don stand for? I want to remember that.
That was a title of respect, kind of like Mr.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
But in I know it's that way in Spanish, but I don't know.
Yeah,
if it's that way
exactly.
in Italian.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me see if Google will tell us real quick.
Don is the title given to priests in Italy. Yeah, that's what I found.
Is that what it says?
Yeah, that's what it says.
What did you say, Ron?
It says Don is the title given to priests in Italy. It says Don Bosco. Don is the title given to priests in Italy.
What does the title Don in Italian mean? Okay, it says the word Don in Italian means boss.
It's like you were saying the mafia. They call him Don.
Don Corleone.
Yeah, so the leader of a mafia gang came to be known as the Don. Okay, that's probably just a specific thing, though. I think it's more general. It means, here's another one, Cora.
No, they did give that to priests, though. I remember hearing that.
That's former respect. Respect.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out if there's like a more precise definition. It may just be for priests, it's what I was saying before. But, they say that in Spanish too. It's D-O-N, the same thing. Anyway, no big deal.
Can we address you as Don?
Yeah, I'm Donald. Donald Matt. No, yeah. Okay, so any questions? Any other questions? Come on, you always have them.
I have to watch last week, so I'm behind.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and do the. After the thing about Don Bosco, I want to get back to the catechism, and what I want to do is. I want to go back because we kind of jumped into the we're in the section called the celebration of the Christian mystery. It's part 2, okay, of 4 parts, and we jumped into the Holy Eucharist, and I don't know why I just felt like I needed to go into that, spend a little bit of time on that, which is like it's the source and the summit of our faith and the sort of it's the sacrament of sacraments. So we jumped to like the juiciest part, and then now we're going to go back and try to understand the whole meaning of. And we talked a little bit about what liturgy is, but there's this section in the Catechism that's going to begin explaining liturgy and what it's doing. Okay, so we'll do that. But first, I want to share with you guys. And for sure, we got to get in before April. We got to get in back to the sacrament of confirmation, because we have two people being confirmed. Erica wanted to be here tonight. Her daughter got sick, so she's home. And Bjorn wanted to be here, but I think he's still driving right now. He's driving, trying to get here. Okay, so let me share with you this amazing story. Come on. Okay. A dream about Saint Dominic Savio. Why Saint Dominic Savio? I thought we were talking about Saint John Bosco. Well, because that's one of his pupils, and he became a saint. Okay, and I think he's not the only one. All right, so listen up. On the night of December 6th, I dreamed as follows. It seemed to me that I was standing on a hill, looking down on an immense plain that stretched away into the invisible distance. It was as blue as the sea in perfect calm. But what I was looking at was not water. It seemed like crystal, unblemished and sparkling. Long and broad avenues divided the plain up into large gardens of indescribable beauty, in which were lawns, groves, and ornamental trees, flowering shrubs and flower beds with an amazing variety of ornamental flowers. What you have seen in gardens can give you a little idea of how wonderful all this was. There were trees whose leaves seemed to be of gold, the branches and trunks of precious stones. Scattered here and there in the gardens were buildings whose appearance and magnificence rivaled the setting in which they stood. I could not estimate what immense sums of money one of these would have cost to build. The thought ran through my head, if I could have any one of these buildings for my boys, how happy they would be. As I stood there, wrapped in wonder, the sound of sweet and entrancing music filled the air. All possible instruments seemed to be combining in wonderful harmony, and together with them choirs of singers. I then saw great numbers of people in the garden, some walking, some sitting, all radiantly happy. Some were singing, some playing instruments, and it was obvious that they derived equal pleasure from hearing others as they did from the music they were making themselves. They were singing in Latin these words, "All honor and glory to God, the Almighty Father, creator of the ages, who was, who is, and who will come to judge the living and the dead through all ages." There now suddenly appeared a great army of boys. Many of them I knew, boys who had been with me in the oratory or in one of our schools, but the majority I did not know. This endless line began moving towards me. At its head was Dominic Savio. After him, several priests and many other priests and brothers, each at the head of a group of boys. I did not know whether I was awake or dreaming. I clapped my hands together and felt my arms and chest in the endeavor to see how real was what I was seeing. An intense, brilliant light now shone all around. All the boys were radiant with happiness. It shone from their eyes, and their faces had a look of ineffable peace and contentment. They smiled at me, and they looked as though they were going to say something, but no word was uttered. Dominic now walked forward on his own until he stood close beside me. He stood there silently for a moment, smiling and looking at me. How wonderful he looked, how exquisitely he was clothed. The white tunic which reached to his feet was interwoven with golden threads and sparkling jewels. Around his waist he had a broad red sash, also interwoven with precious stones of every color, which sparkled and glittered in a thousand lights. Around his neck there was a necklace of wild flowers, but the flowers were made of precious stones, and the light they reflected lit up further still the beauty and dignity of Dominic's face. His hair, which was crowned with roses, hung down to his shoulders and completed the quite indescribable effect of his total appearance. This is a picture they show. What? I hit the power button. So it doesn't do it any justice, but okay. The others were dressed in varying degrees of splendor, all of which had their own symbolic meaning you would not understand. One thing they all had in common was the broad red sash around their waists. I thought to myself, what does this all mean? Where on earth am I? And I stood there silently, not daring to say a word. Dominic then spoke. And I'm going to let you know what he said next week. Let's just...
Yeah.
Built that one up a little bit. Why are you standing there as though you were dumb? You dummy. Just kidding. Are you not the one I knew who was always so fearless, able to sustain persecutions, calumnies, and dangers of every kind? Have you lost your courage? Why do you not speak? Half stammering, I replied, I don't know what to say. Are you really Dominic Savio? Yes, indeed. Don't you recognize me? How is it that you are here? I have come to talk with you, Dominic replied affectionately. We spoke together so often when I was alive. You were always so kind and generous to me, and I responded to your love with my complete confidence and affection. Ask me anything you wish. Where am I? I asked. You are in a place of happiness. He replied, where all that is beautiful can be enjoyed. Is this heaven then? No. Whatever is here is of the earth, although improved beyond conception by the power of God. No living person can ever see or imagine the wonders of eternity. So here he was seeing this amazing imagery, but it was the best that God would do to just alter the earth. But it's not heaven, so it doesn't compare. Isn't that amazing? So he says, would it be possible to have natural light more brilliant than this? Yes, quite possible. Look, there in the distance. I looked, and a ray of light suddenly appeared, so penetrating and of such brilliance that I had to close my eyes. And I cried out in alarm so loudly that I woke the priest who was sleeping in the room nearby. So this sort of lets you know this is not just a dream. I opened my eyes after a moment and said, but that is surely a ray of the divine light. No, even that does not give you any idea. In heaven, we enjoy God, and that in everything. I had by now recovered from my initial amazement and was looking at Dominic as he stood before me. I said, why are you wearing that dazzling white tunic? Dominic did not answer, but the choirs of voices beautifully sustained by the many instruments sang in Latin. They had their loins girt and have washed their tunics in the blood of the Lamb. What does the red sash you wear mean? I then asked. Again, Dominic did not reply. And a solo voice sang the words, they are virgins and they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. I then realized that the blood-red sash was a symbol of the great efforts and sacrifices made, the quasi-martyrdom suffered, to live a completely pure life. It symbolized also the spirit of penance, which cleanses the soul of its faults. The dazzling white of the tunic represented a life from baptism to death without any serious rejection of God. My eyes were drawn to the serried ranks of boys behind Dominic, and I asked him, who are these boys, and why are they all so radiant and resplendent? The answer came from the boys themselves, who began to sing wonderful harmony. These are like the angels of God in heaven. Dominic, although the youngest, was obviously the leader, standing out well ahead of them. I therefore asked him, Why is that you take precedence over the others? I am the oldest. But you are not, I replied. There are many here much older than you. I am God's ambassador. The meaning of what it was all about suddenly dawned on me, and I hastened to say, Let us talk about what concerns me and my work. Perhaps you have something important to tell me. By the way, so what do you think that was about the age?
Wisdom?
Yeah, well, he says, I'm the oldest, but you are not, I replied. There are many much older than you. And then he said, I am God's ambassador. So it's not clear, but I mean, there's certainly in heaven, there's higher levels of glory given. And so he was just kind of given an answer. I don't know exactly why it was like that, but it was an answer of recognizing that, yeah, there is something that distinguishes me. Older maybe in some greater sense. Okay? And then, so he says, let us talk about what concerns me and my work. Perhaps you have something important to tell me. Speak to me of the past, present, and future of our work and of my dear sons. With regard to the past, your congregation has clearly done much good. Look over there at the great gathering of boys. I looked and said to him, How many are there, and how happy? Look at what is written over the entrance of to that garden, said Dominic. I looked and saw written, All those there are Salesians, or those who have been educated by you and your sons, or who in some way or other have been sent on the way to God and their salvation made really possible. Count them if you can. But they would be many, but they would be many, many more still if you had greater faith and confidence in God.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty amazing. I mean, I think the Lord wants us to hear this vision, because I think he wants us to see that when you work hard at, being a disciple, and you're trying to, work for the salvation of souls and God's glory, the results can be incredible. He was showing him all these people. I mean, I don't think he was trying to say exactly that Don Bosco is like their only possibility for salvation, but he was pretty instrumental. So it's a result of all that he did with the Salesians and everybody that they taught. Got them to heaven. But then he kind of shows them, if you had more faith, there would have been a lot more. Dominic then held before me a magnificent bunch of flowers. They were roses, violets, sunflowers, lilies, sprigs of evergreen, and most unusual for a bouquet, ears of wheat. He offered it to me and said, Look. I am looking, I replied, but I don't understand a thing. Make sure that all your boys have it and that they defend it fearlessly against anyone who would try to take it from them. With these flowers, secure their possession. They can never fail to be happy. With these flowers secure in their possession, they can never fail to be happy. I still don't understand. Please explain. These flowers represent the virtues and qualities which your boys need in order to be able to live for God instead of for themselves. The rose is the symbol of love, the violet of humility, the sunflower of obedience, the gentian of penance and self-discipline, the ears of corn of frequent communion, the lily of purity, the sprigs of evergreen, of constancy and perseverance. No one was adorned with these flowers better than yourself, I said to him. Tell me, what was your greatest consolation when you came to die? What do you think? He answered. I had several attempts at trying to say what I thought it might be, such as having lived such a pure life, having heaped up so much treasure in heaven by all his good works, and so on. But to all he shook his head with a smile. Tell me then, I said, quite crestfallen at my failure. What was it? He helped me. What helped me most and gave me greatest joy when I was dying, replied Dominic, was the loving care and help of the great Mother of God. Tell your sons not to fail to keep close to her while they are alive. But hurry, the time is almost up. What about the future, I asked. In this coming year, you will have great sorrows to bear. Altogether, 8 of your sons will die. But be of good heart. They will leave this life for heaven. God is always with you and will give you other sons equally worthy. What about the Salesian congregation? God has great things in store for it. This coming year, something will begin which will stretch out to the whole world, from north to south, from east to west. This is only one of many great developments of the future. However, this can only be so on condition that your sons keep God's way and plan. Keep to God's way and plan, and not their own. If your priests can be faithful to the mission and way of life God has shown you, the future of the Salesian congregation will be an extraordinary one, and there will be no counting the number of those brought to God through it. There is one further very important condition, however, and that is that you all remain close to the great Mother of God and ever proclaim fearlessly, by your example, the dignity of a pure and chaste life, which is so pleasing to God. Imagine how far people are from really knowing that. Catholics, they don't really know this. They don't really, fully develop a relationship with the Blessed Virgin Mary. They don't know how important purity is, chastity. So it's just amazing. What about the church in general? I then asked. What is in store for the church? God alone knows, he said. These are things he reserves to himself, and they cannot be communicated beforehand to any created being. And Pius IX? I asked. This much I can say. He will not have to endure on earth much longer. God will reward him for his faithful service. The church will not be submerged by present difficulties. What about myself? I asked. You have many sorrows and difficulties ahead of you, but hurry, as time is almost up. I stretched out my hands to detain him, if I could, but they grasped only the air. Dominic smiled and said, "What are you trying to do?" Dummy. I didn't say dummy. I don't want to let you go, I said. But you are bodily here. Are you really my son Dominic? This is how things are. If in God's providence someone who is dead has to appear to someone still alive, he is seen in his normal bodily appearance and distinguishing characteristics. He cannot, however, be bodily touched since he is a pure spirit. You guys realize, too, somebody in this state is not in the same state that Jesus Christ was. Jesus could be touched. Why?
That was his glorified body.
That's right. You see, people that are in heaven right now, they're still not there yet. They're waiting until the final day when everybody will be given their glorified bodies. So there's no way to touch them. Since he is pure spirit, he retains this bodily appearance until he is reunited with his body at the resurrection. One last thing, I now said, are all my boys living as children of God? Tell me something that will make it possible for me to help them more. You can divide your boys into 3 groups, Dominic replied. And these 3 sheets of paper indicate how. He handed me the first one. On it was written in large characters, unconquered. This sheet contained the names of those who had never been overcome by evil. They were very numerous. I saw them all before me. Many of them I knew. Many I saw for the first time. I saw how they lived their lives for God fearlessly and unflinchingly, in spite of the enormous difficulties and dangers they encountered. It was as though they were traveling along a road and were being continually ambushed. They were greatly hindered and molested by the barrage, but never brought down or wounded. Dominic then gave me the second sheet, on which was written in large characters, casualties. On this sheet, the names of those who had seriously offended God, been badly wounded on the journey, but regained their balance and healed their wounds with a good confession and communion, and were trying to press on again, although some showed signs of being discouraged by their experience. They were more in number than on the first sheet. More in number. I saw them all and once again recognized many of them. I held out my hand for the third sheet, on which I could see written the words, "Overcome by evil." On the sheet, there were names of those who had rejected God by serious sins and were continuing to do so, content to remain deprived of his friendship. I was very anxious to know who they might be and attempted to take the sheet from Dominic. "Wait a moment," he said to me earnestly. "When you open this sheet, a terrible stench will be given off, which neither you nor I possibly bear. Neither you nor I could possibly bear. It is likewise intolerable to the angels of God and God himself." "How can this be?" I said, "the angels and God being pure spirits?" "I mean this," he replied, "that just as you seek to put the greatest distance possible between yourself and what nauseates you, so those who reject God by serious sin are separated from him more and more." He then gave me the sheet, saying, "Look at it and try to make good sense of it for your sons. Never forget the bunch of flowers, and try hard to make sure that all have one and never let it go." So saying, he receded from me into the others who were grouped behind him. I unfolded the sheet. I did not see any names, but in a flash I saw before me all those whose names were written. I looked at them with a heavy heart. The majority of them I knew. They belonged to the oratory or other of our schools. Many of them were normally regarded as good boys, and some even as being among the best. Such they were, far from being. That's an amazing thing right there. So here he is. He's actually given an image of who's living in mortal sin and continually doing so. Okay, it wasn't just that he happened to catch somebody in a bad moment, but they were continually living in mortal sin, and yet their reputation and their appearance was the contrary. Isn't that amazing? Shows you how little we have a sense for all of this. Okay? And then, so he says, when the paper was unfolded, there arose from it such a horrible stench that I was completely overcome. My head throbbed agonizingly, and I began to vomit so violently that I thought I must die. Everything became dark, and the vision was no more. A piercing flash of lightning tore across the sky, and as its frightening crash of thunder reverberated in my ear, I woke, trembling with fear. The stench was still present in my room, clinging to the walls and furniture, and remained there for several days. Thus repugnant to God is the very name of those who reject him and surrender themselves to the horrors of self-indulgence. Whenever the memory of that stench comes back to me, I am seized anew with pain and nausea, and I can, with difficulty, prevent myself from vomiting. I have spoken with some of the boys whose names I saw written on the lists, and I know for certain that what I saw in the dream is only too true. That's it. What does that tell you?
It's not real.
What's that?
It's all real,
It's all real. What's all real?
you know, everything that we're
Taught?
learning.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, what just happened in that? It's so you've got Don Bosco. First of all, we see things that we don't normally get to see. They're mysteries, but you're kind of getting a glimpse of it, a little bit further glimpse than usual, right? Because you're seeing, like, he did this great work with the Salesians, and he's actually able to see, like, the results. There's all these people in heaven as a result of the Salesians. It was saying in there, your students and then the people that they taught and affected and blah, 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 right? So that's an amazing thing. But it ends with this whole thing about how, mortal sin. Mortal sin is real, and, it's described as, especially, I'm trying to remember as it said it. I mean, I think it's not the ones that go into mortal sin that were in the second category and then come back out again and they go to confession and they get strengthened again. But it's these other ones that he was obviously, God doesn't smell. God doesn't have nausea. But if we're trying to get an idea of how we are to God when we're in that state, this is the best way to describe it. It's where you're trying to get the most distance you can. Now, why? That seems strange. I mean, God is like omnipotent. Why would he create this situation? Well, it's a mystery.
What?
It's a mystery. I'm just saying that, like, we don't realize it. I mean, there's other things I could read you too, where God talks about mortal sin to Catherine of Siena. And he talks about how the person that's in mortal sin is like a dead body. They can hardly do anything for themselves. Okay, so you wonder why it is that people, they get into mortal sin, and yet they keep hearing people say, no, get out of that. No, you need to do this. No, you need to stop that. And they hardly can act for themselves because sin is so paralyzing. And it so separates you from God. That's why it's paralyzing. You can see that this is the way God set things up. When you sin gravely like this and then you continue into it, it just pushes you away from God, and then it creates this repugnance to God because you become his enemy.
Even it's mentioned about lukewarmness.
Yeah, I spit you out of my mouth.
Yes. And that's just being lukewarm.
Yeah. What were we going to say, Carol?
We hear so much about his mercy. Does his mercy ever enter into...
Well, obviously we have to put it all together. I mean, he wasn't trying to cover the whole gamut of theology and the whole story. Okay, I mean, and I know we want to think about mercy in this moment. So, I mean, when you listen to the message of divine mercy, we know that the most hardened sinners are welcome to God's mercy. In fact, they deserve it the most. That's what Jesus said. They deserve it the most. They're most welcome. But nonetheless, you got to keep in mind, this is the state that they've put themselves into. When you read this, you understand that, it's kind of like how I think I've said before that when you're in mortal sin and then you go to Holy Communion. People don't understand what they do to themselves when they go to Holy Communion in that state. It's just like you further put yourself from God, okay? Because it's not like you're not humble enough to accept the remedies that God wants to give you. The remedy is confession. The remedy is conversion. And then when you refuse it, but then it's almost like a slap in God's face to go up and take the Holy Communion. And we're all confused about that right now in the church. Tons of people are confused about that. I mean, actually, it's like if you look at a Spanish Mass, like, in Spanish, and then you look at an English Mass. Now, the Hispanics tend to be confused, but they're so confused that they think it's okay. So many of them, I'm not talking for all Hispanics, but so many of them think that because it becomes sort of a norm, when you go to Mass, you see that not that many people go to communion, right? Now, that actually is a proper thing if not that many people are actually inclined or are disposed to go to communion. However, if you're living a life where you're on a regular basis not disposed to go to communion, there's a problem, right? But so many of them, they get used to this, where they'll go like 10 years at a time, 20 years at a time, no communion. So there's this lack of respect for what great a gift God is giving you. And so it's going to lead to more sin. It's going to lead to a weakness in your faith. Okay? I actually wish I had this other little passage from Luisa Picaretta about what sin does to us. I'll get that for us next time. But anyway, so that's one extreme. Then the other extreme is that so many liberal parishes in English, masses that you go to in English, every single person walks up there and goes to communion. Every single one. And you wonder, does anybody ever fall into sin? So obviously it's a mystery. We don't know. That'd be great if every single person there was worthy of going to communion. But likely not. We just tend to have this extreme though. In some cultures it's this extreme, other cultures it's the other extreme. The one extreme's bad. If you don't ever go to communion, you just sit there in church and it's kind of like a snub to God. And then the other one is like every single person thinks, and if you even question whether or not you should be going to communion. Oh, they have a fit. So that's kind of where we are right now.
It's like, I don't think a lot of people even think about it. They need.
Right. Well, we've trounced on our sacraments and on our liturgy. How? Well, people should know in the Catholic Church. They should know what it is that they're doing, but they don't so much anymore because we don't teach anybody. We're all too afraid to teach people what's really going on, and
important it is.
yeah. So, the fact is that it's like, I don't know, what comes to my mind is that we've made living as a Catholic like a trivial thing. Like it's simple. Like everybody can do it and you hardly have to even lift a finger. You just live and you come down here to feel good. And you come down here to, know each other. We're going to have donuts afterward, and it's a good thing I know these guys. And you come down here when it's convenient, obviously. But it's like a simple thing. Like it's almost nothing to be a Catholic because nothing distinguishes their life from anybody else because they go along with everything else in our culture, which all the wrong things. You see what I mean? So.
But it's like as if, you made that very clear to us when you first came here, and I noticed that a lot of people are coming back to Mass. That we're here to begin with, but once you spoke about mortal sin, whatever, those who didn't come frequently or didn't come regularly.
Okay, yeah. So maybe I caught some of them. Yeah. I think so. I think though, since I've been here, there's the message to clarify to people, hey, this is not your option of just staying home when you feel like it. Yeah. That it hit a lot of them probably and got them to actually come every week now. There's some that I don't think it hit well. But it never does. It never hits everybody well. Whenever I have gone to different parishes and taught them the truth about this. But, yeah.
But there are those who can be saved. No?
Yeah. Yeah. So, your point about divine mercy, it is important. I don't know. This should not necessarily make us feel without hope or something, as if nothing's different. You listen to this, it just I think it just delves a little bit further into what we already knew. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I mean? It makes it a little more concrete. Okay, but I think the stark thing was this thing about these three categories of people and how powerful that is. I kind of already had did you guys know that St. Catherine, at one point she was given this sort of a gift, if you want to call it a gift, where she could kind of tell what kind of a state people were in. God just wanted her to know. I don't know why he'd give somebody that gift, but she could tell what state people were in. But when she was around somebody that was in mortal sin, it was the same thing. She could smell it. It was repulsive. And in fact, one time there's a story that she came into contact with this woman who was actually committing adultery with a priest. So she was, not only committed adultery against her husband, but with a priest. And she said she couldn't help herself, but she had to run away and she was vomiting. So I just think, stories like this, they really help us to recognize, because we tend to trivialize this stuff. Like I said, we trivialize the whole Catholic thing, what it means to be a Catholic, and how important it is to follow the laws. Oh yeah, get 90% of them right and you're good to go. That's an A-, right? 90%. Right. So no, God doesn't like it at all. He expects us to take everything we've been given. Take all of his laws, take all of his benefits. If he wants to celebrate Mass with his continual presence with us in the Holy Eucharist, it's a big deal to him. It needs to be a big deal to us.
And I think the grace and mercy question, it's there for us. It's absolutely there.
It's absolutely there. I mean, here's the thing. When somebody is in this repulsive state, I think maybe this is what's causing our feeling, or your thoughts about this. When somebody's in that state where they're far away from God and they're repulsive, I believe he's still sending them graces. Okay? God's sending people graces. I think we're going to find out one day that each one of us, we've been given a plethora of graces. Okay? I mean, whenever I think of mercy and graces that get someone to repent, because those are like the greatest ones. Well, I mean, those are actual graces, as opposed to sanctifying grace. Because people that are in mortal sin are not in sanctifying grace, right? Mm-hmm. But he sends you a grace, right? The story of, I'm blanking on his name. The short man of stature that ran ahead and climbed the tree. Zacchaeus, right? So that's a story of mercy. I mean, think about it. Why would this guy that's living a life of, being a tax collector and cheating people, which he admitted, okay? I suppose he could have already had a conversion before the whole situation, but it doesn't seem like it. Mm-hmm. So what seems like happened is that he saw this holy man of Galilee walking by, who he probably didn't know. He probably wasn't paying attention to all these things, but something hit him in the side that said, you need to go pay attention to who that is and what's going on. So he did. And so he ran ahead and he climbed a tree. That's like all of us. Like, it's like God's just telling you, go whatever. Listen to what this guy has to say. Watch this video. Read this book. Listen to one of Father Matt's homilies and don't get angry. Whatever it is. Anyway, Zacchaeus. So then that's only part A. So he runs ahead, climbs the tree, and then part B is Christ, his encounter with Christ, which is, that whole thing, is kind of a symbol of how we all come to Christ, So he now encounters him and he recognizes this is a person who represents God. He doesn't know he's the Messiah. I don't think how would he know he's the Messiah? How would he know he's the Son of God? He wouldn't know that. But he represents God for him. And there was something inside him telling him, no, you need to listen to this guy, and you need to, and probably there were demons telling him too, you're not worthy. But he overcame those, and Christ showed him, you are worthy. He says, I want to come to your house. And you see, this is a big act of mercy. Mm-hmm. So is God doing that with all those souls out there that are in the third category? Yeah, he's doing it. He's doing it. He's giving them a chance. He already gave them a chance too, likely, before they got themselves into that category. Mm-hmm. Okay? But he's also sending out his graces to get people to repent. But, in the end, did they give a number? They gave a certain number that were of the people that were in the, that never really fell. I don't really know if that does represent people that have never committed a mortal sin. It may be, but it seems like it also talked about, and we're not seriously injured. So maybe you committed a mortal sin, but you were right back because you recognized it right away and you repented right away. But there's others that they fell and were in sickness for a while, but then they recovered and came back. That's the second category. So I don't know that the first category is necessarily anybody that never committed a serious sin, but they never really fell away far from God, I think is the point. Right? But then there's that. So that was a certain number. He says, but the number of people that fell away and were sick, that is a greater number. But how many were the other number? Likely a bigger number. Okay? Let's not be, unrealistic. We know that there's a narrow path and there's a wide path that leads to destruction. Okay? And many travel that and few travel the other one. Anyway, we pretty much killed all the time. That was a great story, though.
It is. It is.
What year was that? I missed what year was.
What year was Don Bosco? Well, he was born in 1815.
1815?
Yeah, and he died in 1888. So I don't know when this dream was.
We did. We watched that. It was like 18. I'm sorry. It was when he was. Yeah.
Sometime during his life.
Wow.
So he was in the rectory, and he had the dream. But obviously, it wasn't just a dream. It was a message from God, because afterward, like, number one, he woke up his other priest in the rectory by screaming, and he screamed in the dream. And number two, there was a stench that lasted like 3 days or however long, right? So it's clearly. By the way, if you guys. I haven't read this, but I knew about the story because I watched this guy. It's Anthony Stein, Return to Tradition, and he had covered this story months back, and so I knew about it. And then today was the feast day, so I was like, I want to get that story. I couldn't find it anywhere, and then I finally found it in this book, which I bought for $3 on Google. So I want to share the book with you guys, so you can. Let me see here.
And it's a book specifically on Don Bosco?
Yeah, it's called This thing is a stinker. How do I get it? There it is. Go to the cover. There it is. So, 40 Dreams of St. John Bosco. And 40 Dreams. So, like I was saying in the homily, he's actually a lot more spectacular than you probably normally hear about. In other words, there was a lot of spectacular things with this guy. He could, at least on one occasion that I was reading, he read somebody's soul, so he was able to tell him his sins. The guy came and he went to confess, and he had all his sins written down, and Father Bosco took his paper and threw it in the fire, and he gave him back all his sins from his mind. The same ones that were already written down. But he's not the only saint that's ever done that. You know that, right? We had Saint John Vianney that had that. Padre Pio had those powers. There's been a number of them. He healed people. He also did some prophecies. Actually, I think there's some end times prophecies from Don Bosco as well. And by the way, one of his dreams is over. It's an image of the church, which is basically is a boat. It's a big ship, which is. Wait a minute. Maybe I'm messing it up. All I remember is that there are these two pillars which are stabilizing the church. And it's a boat, and then there's these two pillars that are stabilizing the boat with some chains. Okay? But there's something that those pillars represent. What do you think they are? They're going to stabilize this boat, which the church wants to disintegrate. What do you think the two pillars are?
Christ.
The Holy Eucharist. So yes. I don't know if you were thinking of Christ in the Holy Eucharist. And the Blessed Virgin Mary. Those are the two pillars. So doesn't that make sense, though, that we have the two hearts? We have the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And we have the devotion to the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart. And they seem kind of like, this is why I'm always harping about this. Like, come on, guys, we got to do this devotion. Why? Because this is God's solution. This is what's chaining the church down. The church wants to disintegrate. But Don Bosco had a dream that it was the Blessed Virgin Mary and the Holy Eucharist. Well, the Sacred Heart is nothing other than Jesus being hurt by our response to the Holy Eucharist. Maybe there's more involved, I'm sure there is, but that's mainly it. That all comes through St. Margaret Mary Alacoque. You go back to her, where Jesus appeared to her when she was in adoration. And he appeared to her and said, "Behold the heart." And he explained what his heart, why was it upset? Why was it hurt with the thorns? Because of people's indifference, because of people's ingratitude. And then Our Lady appeared the same way in 1917 in Fatima with her heart in her hand, with thorns around it. And why? Ingratitude. Okay? So we don't respect and we don't receive the gifts from God as we should. But those are the two things that are stabilizing the church. It's going to save the church. So hold on to those things. And you could hear that in the thing too. He was to the one guy, the one saint, remember? Dominic Savio. He said, "Well, what was your trick, or what was your key to your success?" And and he's tried to think of all of them. And it's the Blessed Virgin Mary. So that was his best advice. If you want to do well in life, attach yourself to Our Lady.
Also, we don't pay enough attention to his passion. I read that somewhere.
Yeah, and you know what? That's all connected with the Sacred Heart and the Holy Eucharist, because what is the Holy Eucharist? Nothing other than the, as I've said before, the representation of the Passion. Okay? Making present the Passion.
Have you read or do you know anything about the Blessed Mother felt all of the pain? She experienced his passion with him. Have you read that?
No.
That's what Mary of Agreda, Mystical City of God.
Yeah.
She says that she requested that when Jesus went through his passion, that she would feel everything that he felt, and God agreed.
Wow.
But she didn't physically get bruised like Jesus did.
So there were no signs of it. It's kind of like somebody that would have the stigmata, but then there have been lots of saints that have had it, but they specifically requested to not have any signs of it, outward signs. Like one of them, I think that was Luisa Picaretta, and like upon her death, the signs appeared. So it's like God was like, "Okay, I'll agree with you, but like at the last moment, I want to let everybody know what she went through." And Padre Pio, I don't know if you guys know that, but he, for whatever reason, like you would think that you might be kind of proud. I mean, that would be one of the pitfalls of getting stigmata or anything like that, because like people would be like, "Oh wow, you're holy," But he was like utterly embarrassed by it. I mean, I guess that shows you how humble he is, but he was utterly embarrassed. And so when it started to happen, he was begging God that there would be no sign of it. But obviously it turned out that God didn't give him that, because he had signs of it. You could see his hands were always bleeding.
And he apparently was a very close friend of Conchita.
That's true.
Garabandal, and
He was very close to Conchita of Garabandal.
Yeah, knows.
He purportedly expressed that he has seen the miracle that's been prophesied there. That he saw. There was another priest that saw it before he died as well. So it's like a prevision of the miracle.
But he left Conchita one of his blood-stained gloves.
Yeah.
And his personal rosary.
Yeah.
And I think the cloth that was over his head when he was,
Are you reading that in the book that I recommended you?
I haven't.
It's in that book.
Yeah.
But I saw on one of the videos that you sent me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and one more thing I wanted to mention about St. Don Bosco. What was that? It was just popped in my head. Whenever you can't think of something, don't tell people you can't think of it. 'Cause that, for sure, it's going to just set that block in stone.
You'll remember it as soon as you...
Yeah. No, there was something cool about Saint Don Bosco. Oh, he levitated. So these things are, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I got a rendition of his stuff that's a little bit too exaggerating, but I think it's probably true. But from a few eyewitnesses, when he was celebrating Mass, because you guys know that there was a saint that used to, I mean, there's been a number of them. I think maybe Padre Pio, but anyway, but Saint Don Bosco, he levitated a few inches when he was celebrating Mass, a few times. But did you guys know of Saint John of Cupertino? You ever heard of him? He used to levitate like to an extremity. Like he would levitate like almost every Mass, and it just became like such a like people would go there to see that. And I mean, but all the other people in his order, I don't remember what order he was in, but anyway, so like they actually had to like, you know, not let him do it. But there was moments where he was in a cathedral and he floated all the way to like the ceiling of the cathedral. I know there's a lot not known about the Catholic faith because, you know, problem is, you know, you tell stories like that, like 9 out of 10 people look at you, if they're not really faithful, they look at you like you're a fool. You tell stories. That's why these stories don't really get out that much. But there's a lot of really fascinating things.
There's a whole supernatural world out there
that most people don't know about. Yeah. Anyway, let's wrap it up. Yes. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So next time we'll get into the catechism on the beginning of that section on the Christian mystery. Okay? Have a great night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
See you mañana.
Okay.
Yeah.